Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this talk by the Friends of Marble Hill on Georgian Dinners given by Minna Andersen. My name is Adam Sutton, and I'm a videographer and documentary maker. I make films for auction houses and galleries, and I specialize in travel and design and art world profiles. Just before we start this evening, I want to give you just a few tips on the Zoom meeting we're about to start. The talk is being recorded. If your video has not been automatically switched off, please make sure that it is. Only the speakers will be recorded. The talk will be given without interruption. Please feel free to write your questions, which will be only visible to me in the chat function. Once the talk is over, there'll be plenty of time to answer questions, which I will read out to Minna at the end. I'd like to just give you a little bit of an introduction to the Friends of Marble Hill, for those of you who are not familiar with them. The Friends of Marble Hill was formed in October 2020 to help ensure that Marble Hill site has a sustainable future by engaging and involving the local community to use and support the site more extensively. The Friends will promote the heritage and natural diversity of the site, raise funds, and encourage the voluntary support needed by English Heritage to run the house and the park. The Friends are particularly keen to increase the relevance of the site to a younger audience and to build their involvement in its future, as well as to encourage a better understanding of the social history in Marble Hill and its immediate surroundings. If you would like to get more involved, the Friends would love to hear from you. So please, you can find all the details you need on their website, which is friendsofmarblehill.org.uk. Now I can do a little brief introduction to our speaker this evening, who is Minna Andersen, who is also on the committee of the Friends of Marble Hill. She's also a volunteer for Orleans House Gallery, which is next door, and a major supporter of the Poppy Factory in Richmond, where she gives talks on the history of the poppy appeal and the important work of that organisation. Minna, who left her native Finland about 30 years ago, became a registered London Blue Badge Guide, specialising in historical walking tours, museums and galleries, both for private and corporate clients. I myself have been very fortunate to have been on many tours with Minna, and her depth of knowledge is quite remarkable, and she has never failed to surprise me with little details and stories of places which I thought I knew quite a lot about. But it's her home of Richmond and Twickenham that holds a particularly special place in Minna's heart. She's incredibly passionate about this area and the historical importance of it, its wonderful architecture, and of course the breathtaking scenery along the river. Which brings us to this evening's talk on Georgian dinners, a particularly fascinating period with almost bankrupting costumes and general overwhelming excess. Their dental hygiene and diet certainly left a little bit desired, which I'm sure Minna will now tell us all about. Please have your rennies at the ready as we have dinner with the Georgians at Marble Hill House. Minna.
Yeah. Well, everyone, thank you, Adam, so much for this very kind introduction and welcome. Welcome to the Georgian Dinners. And this journey will now take us through, we are going to have a look at the evening and a whole day through the eyes of the aristocratic host and through the aristocratic guest. And what better way to start than with the pineapple? The pineapple was the caviar of the day. The pineapple will follow us throughout our journey this evening as we travel to the heart of this opulent entertaining and what was it to be a guest or a host during 1700s. And then also we learn throughout the talk for the next half an hour that how important it was to be the pineapple of politeness. And that was the highest accolade you were given if you were a true gentleman or a lady. So our journey is along the River Thames in the borough of Richmond. And for those of our viewers who are not familiar with this area, these two houses, house on the left, the Orleans House, and on the right-hand side, Marble Hill House, are literally 500 meters apart from each other. They are next door neighbors. Both houses were built in the very beginning of 1700s. And I will be telling you more about the hosts and the houses a bit later. But the whole of this stretch of the River Thames, I always say that this was the Sloane Avenue of the day. This stretch of the river was the place where you came to retire. This stretch of the river was between two palaces. There was Hampton Court, a few miles down the river, up the river, and then there was Kew Palace, and before that Richmond Palace on the other side. So this is where all the aristocrats came. This is where they built their houses. This is where they wanted to see and to be seen. And we are spending our evening in the middle of this fabulously aristocratic area of 1700. So who were these aristocrats? I mean, the 1700s, it was the age of enlightenment. Well, the Georgians, they actually didn't give us the industry of the Victorians or the sensational head choppings of the Tudors. But what they gave us modern Britain. They gave us the modern Britain as we know it today. And Britain, that was very open society. World changed, the information was within the people. Newspapers were read in coffee houses. Politics and royal affairs were discussed, so people knew what was going on. And what did they give us? Well, they give us dinners, as we can see, 75-course dinners that I will take you through. But what else they gave us? They gave us Handel's oratorios. They gave us novels, satirists, cabinet governments, walls. They gave us Rule Britannia, British Museum, Britannica Encyclopedia. They gave us Sandwich, thanks to the card-playing Earl. And they gave us courtesans who were so rich that they ate 1,000-guinea banknotes between their bread. So what the Georgians did, they did everything with great commitment, and they really drank from the deep cup of life. And they gave us cookbooks. Because this was also the era of grand tours. So the aristocratic capture took the aristocrats to Europe, to Italy and France mainly, and sometimes even further. And also this area there, this era was the time of sending cooks to France. The aristocrats, they sent their cooks to France to learn to cook the French way. Everything, unless we were in war with the French. The French food was the thing. They wanted to copy that. And also French Revolution was beneficial if we think of our culinary aspects here in England, because the refugees fled north and many of them came to England and brought their culinary secrets with them. But this lady on the book on the right-hand side she was the original domestic goddess, Mrs. Raffard, who wrote a book, nearly 400 pages, and there were 900 recipes how to entertain and how to cook, as well as then the copy on the left-hand side from 1740s, another lady, Anna Klasse, who also then advised how to entertain. So books were written. So this was really before we even start dressing for dinner, we knew that something was going on behind the scenes. When we think of the dinner, we think of the evening time. But the dinner for the Georgians was between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. In Henry VIII's time, dinner was at 11 o'clock in the morning, because the day was completely thought in a different way. The dinner then went later on, sort of when we come to Regency period of end of 1700s, the dinner was then at 6 o'clock in the evening. And that's when the afternoon tea then started, because the ladies were hungry before they were able to eat. So what happens then? You had to get ready for your fabulous dinner parties. And that wasn't an easy thing to do. The ladies had to do their hair. And the bigger the better. Of course, the wigs came from France. Charles II had been in exile in the court of Louis XIV around, well, before the restoration of 1660. And when he came back here, he brought, of course, all the sort of new things he had found and learned. He brought them with him, and one was the wig. And wider, the better. And higher the hair, the better. The ladies were known to have had feathers up to 3 feet. Those are fabulous, fabulous hairdos. And this was also, men very often wore wigs. With ladies, it was their own hair. And it had to be powdered. And about a kilo, I have got here a 1 kilo bag of flour. It took about a kilo to powder your hair. First of all, you put some pomatum. It was like a lotion on your hair so that this would stick. And now sort of lockdown hair, sometimes I think that, shall I sort of steal some of the Georgian hairstylist tips? But so kilo of this. And if you were very rich aristocrats, it wasn't just plain flour, which the poorer people used. The aristocrats used sweet cypress. And they were sort of powdering towns and powdering rooms. So it was a massive, huge thing. And of course, syphilis had made a lot of people bald and the hair was falling out. So wigs were sort of very good way of covering that balding hair. And then, as you can see in the lady on the left-hand side, she has flowers, waxed flowers and fruits in her hair. And these elaborate hairstyles stayed in place for weeks. And ladies very often had a scratching rod that they were able to then sort of scratch their hair and head because the lice, of course, loved the flower and made a very comfortable home in these elaborate hairstyles. Then, of course, at the end of 1700s came the hair powder tax. In 1795 was the hair powder tax. It was 1 guinea. And the people, some refused to pay, and then the hairstyles started to change. But the ones who paid the 1 guinea hair powder tax were known as the guinea pigs. So that's where that saying comes from. And then the famous Georgian make-up. So it wasn't easy to pop out for aristocratic dinner. It took hours. And of course, the ladies had to have this "I have never been outside" look. Whiter the face, better it was. And how you whitened your face was with horse manure and vinegar, or then lead. So lead poisoning was sort of very, 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 very common. And then you made your lips and cheeks red, also with sort of lead colored with carmine, or then you used mercury. So that was another way to sort of bring the redness out on your cheeks. And the lady in the middle has got these beauty patches. And they had a couple of functions. One was that they covered, if you had smallpox scars, they covered smallpox scars and blemishes. But then also it was a political statement that if you placed the beauty patch on the corner of your mouth on the right side, it meant that you were a supporter of the Tories. On the left-hand side, it was for the Whigs. And if you placed it on the edge of in the corner of your eye, it meant that it was an invitation for love. So many functions for those. And of course, eyebrows, they fell off because of lead poisoning. So they were drawn, they loved sort of the black eyebrows, especially the middle lady there. And they were drawn with burnt cork or lead. And then Adam mentioned that the dental hygiene, of course, was something to sort of quite something from a different planet, even what we think of today. And and reason why you very rarely see the Georgians smile, and that is because their teeth were simply rotting. Everything was sweet, and I will be talking about the food. We are entering the dining room soon, and they whitened their teeth if they still had any teeth left. Teeth were whitened with cuttlefish and bicarbonate soda. And if your tooth had fallen out, you hoped to find a live donor who was willing to have his or her tooth extracted and then planted into your mouth. That was very expensive. The next less expensive was to take the teeth out of the dead soldiers. Or dead bodies in that respect. So it's famous for the Waterloo teeth, that men who had died in the Battle of Waterloo of 1815, their teeth were very popular and expensive commodity for the church. And then, of course, the dress. So we are not we haven't even left home, and we are already breathless what it takes to even pretend to go to a dinner party. The dress was a very important statement of your social class. You couldn't dress above your social class, but you want to be sort of really up there to be the talk of the town. For example, in court, there were no invitations. So you only got in how you had dressed yourself. So people, as Adam said in the introduction, people went bankrupt wanting to buy dresses and accessories that were wonderful and beautiful enough to grant them access to court. They sold their houses, mortgaged their houses, and but then sort of the aristocratic dinners were not quite that strict. The dresses still cost a lot. We are talking thousands and thousands of pounds, and you couldn't wear the dress more than once. The ladies have, first of all, they have corset, very stiff corset, body stockings, petticoat, gown, ruffles, and shoes, and then whalebone hooped skirt. And the whalebone hooped skirt in itself weighed already 3 kilos. Very heavy silks on top, and the mantua dresses could be up to 2 meters wide. So imagine sitting and walking in these dresses was an art in itself. So the ladies were taught how to walk. They were like sort of as if they were on roller skates. That's how it looked like when the ladies walked in these dresses. And if you have ever wondered why the houses, some of the sort of palaces or aristocratic country houses are so empty, they are empty because there was no room to have any furniture when the ladies had clothing like this. And then, of course, the fan. The fan was another absolutely necessary fashion accessory, hugely expensive, but there was an own language what fan meant, how you kept your fan. Here the ladies are getting a lesson on how to use a fan, and books were written where you open and where you kept the fan, and if you put it on your right cheek, it was actually a tool to flirt. On the right side of on the cheek, it meant yes. On the left side, it meant no. And if you put the handle on the lips, that meant that kiss is allowed. And it was all sort of someone is watching us, and let's go behind the corner and sort of have a little sort of intimate moment. So the fan told that it was a secret code to flirt. And then even in Victorian times, and if you didn't have a fan, The same code went for gloves and walking stick with men, and also umbrellas. So it was this code that only the people who were in the know knew what it meant. And then with men, sort of dressed men for court and for aristocratic dinners was, of course, Beau Brummel. He was the original dandy. He was the first gentleman of Europe, of England, and he made the men's clothing as we know it today. He made he invented the long trousers and the coat as we see here, and also this cravat that was tied around his neck. He lived on Chesterfield Street in Mayfair, and he held as if court every morning. Men came to watch him getting dressed. He took up to 5 hours to get dressed. It was like a YouTube video of the day. They sat there and watched him getting dressed and how he tied his necktie. That was sort of taught to the men. And he polished his shoes with champagne. So now we are entering, now that we have our hair and our eyebrows in place, our shoes are shined, we enter two of our these beautiful, fabulous and absolutely exquisite residencies where these dinner parties were held. On the left-hand side, we have Octagon Room from Orleans House. And this Octagon Room, built in 1720 by James Gibbs, was built only and purely and solely for entertainment and to give dinner parties. James Johnston was a retired Secretary of State for Scotland, and he knew the King George I and George II, and this is where they were entertained in true aristocratic style, exactly as we will be walking through in a minute. And also Queen Caroline was entertained here. On the right-hand side is Marble Hill, home of Henrietta Howard, who is here on the left-hand side. She was a remarkable figure in Georgian society and magnet for intellectual and political elite. In her circle of friends were the likes of Alexander Pope and John Gay and Horace Walpole, and she entertained in a style that rivaled the court. And then on the right-hand side is then a guest, Caroline of Anjou, Queen Caroline, who was spouse the Queen for George II. And she was entertained in the room on the left-hand side in Octagon Room in August 1729. But these ladies have got a very interesting connection because Henrietta Howard, she is very often remembered to be the mistress of George II when he was Prince of Wales. And George II, of course, was the husband of Caroline. And Henrietta Howard worked as a mistress of the robes for Caroline of Anjou, so Queen Caroline. So there was a proper menage a trois going on there. So what happens then as we enter the dinner? So first of all, table is normally empty. Here on the left-hand side, there's some food, but table is actually empty. The hostess leads the main, most important lady to the table. And in the beginning of Georgian era, the ladies sat together at one end of the table and men sat together at the other end of the table. And it wasn't until just after the mid-1700s when it was boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. So anyway, so this is where it started. And beginning of, first of all, every table here on the left-hand side, I just point out there is our pineapple. And the pineapple really follows through the Georgian dinner. It was first of all impossible to grow a pineapple at home in England. It was brought already to Europe by Christopher Columbus, but it was so expensive. So you had to buy your own pineapple. To buy a pineapple cost about £5,000 in today's money. And there, if you couldn't afford to buy your pineapple, you rented one. And there were actually pineapple rental shops in London, where you could rent your pineapple. And these pineapple dishes were made, because of course the food was very exotic. So the exotic food required an exotic displays for the host to show their wealth and knowledge, especially. So these pineapple dishes, houses were sort of there were pineapple in gateways, and in this case on top of the roof, and then pineapple bags. And quite funnily, I read that you could also, if you really wanted to show off, you went to an aristocratic dinner party, you brought a pineapple as your accessory. It was there sort of underneath your armpit throughout the dinner. So pineapple was something absolutely exquisite. And then the sort of the dinner service and the silver and cutlery. First of all, the sort of beginning of 1700s, the guests brought their own cutlery with them when they came to a dinner party. Queen Caroline, when she came to the Orleans house, Octagon Room for dinner, she brought her own cutlery. And then on the right-hand side on the photo, the spoon is sort of face down. So all the crests and engravings were done at the back of the spoon. So that was another sort of showing off. And previously only knife and hands were used before, just sort of before the Georgian times. And the knife had a very sharp end, and that's doubled as a toothpick. And then the toothpicks came about, and the knife became more rounded. And the cutlery looked like ours today from the end of 1700s. So the sort of the wealth was shown with everything they could get their hands to, and the exotic crockery and porcelain was also sort of at the center stage of the dining table, as were the napkin folding. They had to actually hire someone professional to come and fold their napkins so that they kept up with the other dinner parties that they had attended to. And it was quite interesting that if we weren't in a war with the French or anyone else in the continent, we were sort of following the suit that what was happening in the continent. So we had napkins if the French didn't have napkins. In sort of complete sort of that we are not doing anything what the French are doing. And opposite, if the French didn't have napkins, we have napkins, and vice versa. When we didn't have napkins, and we were sort of upset with the Europe when they had their napkins, the mouth was just wiped on the tablecloth or then on the sleeve. And this gentleman here has tied the napkin around the neck, and that means that sort of that's where one way of the saying making the ends meet comes from. And then when the fork made a bigger prominence in the dining table, the napkins got smaller, and the eating actually was then less messier. Well, here we are. We are now actually being entertained with this food. So Georgians loved to eat, we know. They had 3 courses. Each course, the first course and second course and dessert, they were all about 25 dishes. I'm reading here just one course. Just sort of hold your horses what they were eating. This is just sort of for starters. They had moonshine, pickled smelts, marbled veal, fish pond, mince pies, globes of gold web with mottos in them, stewed Gordon, pompadour, cream, roast woodcocks, transparent pudding covered with silver bread, pea chicks with asparagus, macaroni, stewed mushrooms. Are you still with me? We haven't finished yet. Pistachio cream, croquant with hot pippins, floating island, collard pig, potted lampreys, rocky island, snipes in savory jelly, burnt cream, and cheese. And they loved their cheese. And books were written, diagrams were drawn. where to place everything. It was absolutely paramount and important to make sure that these dishes were placed in the right order on the table. And then here we have the sort of the second course. The second course was lighter, they say. The second course was sort of creams and syllabub and savory and sweet puddings. The Georgians loved mixing everything. They mixed all the foods. The world was now opening up. There were new flavors coming in from America, from West Indies, India, continental Europe, and they mixed everything together. They paired salt and sugar in unconventional combinations and added candied citrus fruits and peeled currants and sugar into mince pies. They made sorbets and ice creams from artichokes, Parmesan cheese, and anchovies. So if Heston Blumenthal thought that he invented this multisensory cooking and molecular gastronomy, mixing bacon ice cream as he does, no, it was already done by the Georgians 300 years ago. They loved, and everything that they loved peas. Peas had to have everything. It was. I'm quoting here. It was said that peas were essential with every course. The saga of peas continues. Good people are impatient for the next meal with peas. So passion of the elite classes was the peas. And then the dessert. The tablecloth was removed during the dessert, and that's when the official dinner ended. So that's where the sort of the talk was free, and you could sit wherever you wanted, because the first two courses, it was really strict that we only talked about intellectual subjects. But here they loved their ice sculptures, first of all, pineapple cake, and the ice creams. Here we have ice creams, Tokai wine ice cream, truffle, asparagus ice cream, rye bread ice cream, artichoke and Parmesan ice cream. And the little dish on the right-hand side is called penny lick. This is slightly, maybe sort of towards the very end of Regency time, and the ice cream was softer. And this was sold with 1 penny. It was like an ice cream van was selling outside. And he put a spoonful of ice cream into this little glass, got the penny, and you licked it. So with one lick, you had the ice cream, and you handed the glass back, and then the next one got his or her ice cream. Very rarely they were washed. So you can imagine the bacteria. They were actually banned and because the cholera and TB, and it was quite even dangerous. That dinner also then takes its toll, because you have to go and relieve yourself. You have to actually go to the bathroom at some point. What happened was that, of course, in these houses, there were no bathrooms. If you go to Marble Hill House, the Orleans House, when it was Orleans House, there were no bathrooms. You went from room to room to room to room. So the bathrooms actually didn't come and the flushing loo until mid-Victorian times. So what you did is this. So you had a bit, this was like a sort of a chamber pot, a little like a gravy pot. And ladies' underwear was not invented until mid-Victorian time. So underneath this sort of layers and layers of skirt, there was nothing. So they easily could sort of lift the skirt, put the pot between their legs, and go there and then. And men normally, in the corner of the dining room, there was a screen that you could go there, but you were not allowed to leave the table until at dessert. And there are sort of instances when sort of adults have burst and horrible things happened. And there was no shame and there was no privacy. And I'm going to quote a little, there's a sort of tiny little swear word coming up in this quotation. When what was said about the French ambassador's wife during a aristocratic dinner. And it was said that French ambassador's wife annoys everyone, and I quote, with the frequency and quantity of her kissing, which she does not fail to do at least 10 times a day amongst a cloud of witnesses. So no privacy there. And then what did our Georgians drink? Well, of course, no one drank gin, because we know that gin was a drink that was for the poor. The gin craze of the first 50 years of 1700s, this country was more or less drunk. Gin was so cheap, people were used to drinking ale from pint tankards. So when the gin arrived at the end of 1600s, beginning of 1700s, they drank gin from tankards. So every person, woman, man, and even I think children were counted here, drank 2 pints of gin per person per week. So needless to say that this country was rather drunk. So the aristocrats wanted to differentiate themselves from these drunk lower classes by drinking wine. So even they were making wine. Our host, James Johnston from Octagon Room, Orleans House, he had his own vineyard. And it was the symbol of wealth. Gin was cheap and wine was upper class. And they were seeking to distinguish themselves from their alcoholic tastes from the lower classes of the gin drinkers and ale drinkers. And wine was sort of the source of polite conversation. So wine was the drink, and champagne and port. And then, of course, coffee. Coffee came after you had had your dessert. Ladies retired into withdrawing room, and men stayed around the table for an hour discussing freely certain subjects, not for ladies' ears. And then coffee was, I mean, it was the sobering drink, so it sobered the society. It triggered the dawn of sobriety, and also the sort of scientific growth, foundation of cultural and economic growth, and many of the sort of institutions were born out of the coffee house. But ladies didn't like it. There was even a petition against the coffee, because it was sort of something that men just whiled their days away in coffee houses. And then, of course, the cup of tea. As I mentioned, tea was very expensive. Tea was really more expensive than coffee. And a lady on the left, Duchess of Bedford, who invented the afternoon tea, because the dinner was pushed later and later. Tea was really the drink of the aristocracy. And it was said that the right way to brew tea is to leave it brewing for as long as you can recite the Psalm 51, which is about 3 minutes. So that was the length of time for brewing tea. And then hot chocolate. So hot chocolate, if you were really, really wealthy, you had your own chocolate rooms. The 2 photos on the right are from Hampton Court. King George I and II had their own chocolate kitchens there. And then this little device or cup on the left-hand side is called manserina, because hot chocolate was believed that it will help women get pregnant. And then after, in 9 months' time, it will ease with childbirth. So women drank hot chocolate before going to bed, or actually in bed. So this sort of makes it possible to drink it so that it doesn't sort of spill all over your clothing, because these two don't come apart. So they are together. And then Hans Sloane, founder of British Museum and this founder of Chelsea Physics Garden, and doctor, he actually founded the modern day hot chocolate as we know. He was in Jamaica, and there he sort of came across this cocoa, and the locals mixed it with water. He didn't like it. He mixed it with milk, and that's how the hot chocolate. The recipe was then eventually. So Cadbury's got the recipe. So this is basically the recipe from Sir Hans Sloane. Ladies and gentlemen, this our Georgian friends are. They have reached the end of their dinner and culinary journey of this opulence and extravagance. And in this photo drawing, you can even see a pineapple here is split already in half. And they were so wealthy that they can just sort of leave it uneaten there. They are snoring away. They have had a fabulous, fabulous dinner. And I have had such great time taking you around the aristocratic dinner. So on that note, I think I need a drink. So cheers for our aristocratic friends.
Minna, thank you so much.
Let's sort of stop sharing so I can, there we are.
Thank you so much for that.
Well, I couldn't leave. I mean, I had to sort of bring my pineapple with me. So it is here and follows me everywhere where I can possibly sort of have a little word about pineapple.
Well, we have just a bit of time for a few questions. And actually, funny enough, why not start with the pineapple? One question was, are pineapples still grown in this country?
Okay, very good question. They are very, very difficult to grow. There is an old Victorian pineapple house restored in Wales in Pembrokeshire. The village now escapes me, where they grew their pineapples in, was it 2018, a few years ago. But it's more for decoration. So our pineapples most of them come from Costa Rica.
And what happened? Were pineapples continuously popular, or did they sort of fall out of fashion?
That's actually a very good question, because I wanted to bring that in, but I somehow, there wasn't time. There's so much to talk about this. Well, the pineapple was the caviar and the sign of opulence in 1700s. And can anyone guess? Of course, then pineapple became sort of more popular, and more of them sort of entered the country from West Indies. So the Victorians had to invent something completely different. And I bet no one can guess what the Victorians had as their centerpiece, as a sort of instead of pineapple. They had celery, and celery cost about £180 for this celery. This whole thing. So there were celery vases, and celery was at the centerpiece, and that was the talk of the town for the Victorian.
Okay. Was it only the upper classes that went to coffee houses, or
No,
did the more working?
It was everyone person? Actually. That was one of the things that where your class really didn't matter. Everyone went there. Everyone, whether you were a working class or upper class, everyone was in the coffee house. And coffee was really, it was a place to actually sort of where they were called penny universities, because the entrance was 1 penny, and there you were able to read newspapers, discuss with men who had the same kind of mindset. And coffee houses were only for men. That's why the women wrote the petition against coffee houses. And it was for the whole demographics of the society, male society. And that was sort of really the, not all coffee houses were respectable. There were sort of a lot of non-respectable coffee houses for working ladies. And you could get sort of all sorts of things done in the coffee house. There were sort of coffee house where you could have your hair cut. Yeah, let's hope that will open soon. And there was sort of the coffee house where Isaac Newton is known to sort of a couple of times a week dissect a whale. They were like these thermometers for political discussion or for theaters. So fabulous place. Not quite like our Starbucks today.
And how much did one of these major dinner parties tend to cost the hosts? I mean,
well, the dinner party, well, it depends. So if you say that sort of for 12 people, the dinner party in today's money would cost about close to £5,000. If you leave the pineapple out, because the pineapple itself was sort of £5,000.
Right.
So it was easily, and that was just sort of for the basics. If you really put the boat out for 25 dishes per courses, we are talking tens of thousands of pounds in today's money. And they did it not just once a week. I mean, this thing was done often. Plus, then you count the cost of their clothing on top of that.
Very expensive.
Yes, it was very expensive.
One of the questions come in. What would the average person be eating in Georgian times if they weren't going to these wonderful foods?
The average person would be eating, they loved meat. So meat was the staple diet, and people are known, if you have meat, they are known to have eaten 2 pounds of meat in one sitting. So they loved meat and bread and stews. Stews were sort of anything that you can make stews out of. Stews were popular, but the bread had to be white for the upper class or then for the working class. And they colored the dark bread with chalk to make it white. So it was how it looked was so important. It was just so important, and so that you eat sort of very chalky bread. Never mind the taste, but it had to be white. And they ate, so it was sort of the
very interesting question. I imagine these lavish dinners were served by staff, or was it a buffet? How did you eat?
They were served by staff. So when you were let into the dining room, the table was normally empty because the kitchens were quite far away. They were even sometimes in a different house because of the fire risk. So the food was brought when the guests were sitting down. And sometimes then the hot dishes were left on the side tables close to the fireplace to keep them warm. And then everything was laid on the table by staff. So the first course was, there were 25 dishes on the table. And if you couldn't reach to the dish that was at the other end, you just sort of signaled or got a staff to bring it to you. And men always carved, the man sitting next to you carved meat for the ladies. So the meat was never carved, but it was carved there and then for consumption. So it was all then put on the table. So 25 dishes.
Well, I think that is all the questions we've had in. If there's anybody else who would like to add a quick question before we finish. Here we go. How did the women sit in their whalebone skirts when they were sitting down? It must have been very difficult.
How they do it, they sort of lifted it up from the back and then sat. So as I mentioned, when they went to the toilet, there was no shame, there was no privacy. So they absolutely have, so they lifted the hoop behind up towards the back of their heads and sat not very comfortably, I must say. So it wasn't very, very comfortable. So I'm sort of, yes. Rather, it took some time to get used to how to sort of move and sit.
I'm sure. Minna, thank you so much again. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for joining me on this culinary journey, and thank you for Friends of Marble Hill, and thank you, Adam, for being there.
Not at all, absolute pleasure. And just before we finish this evening, I would just like to remind everybody that Kate Slack, who is the head gardener of Marble Hill, will be giving a talk on the restoration of Henrietta Howard's gardens on Thursday, April 29th, again from 6 p.m. till 7. And I hope you can all join us for that as well. I'm just getting one quick question at the end. How big were these skirts? They were very large, but I mean...
They could actually sort of, the dress could be up to 2 meters wide. And that's, if you think, those were the court dresses that if you go to Kensington Palace or Hampton Court, and you can see that they very often have a mantua dress there for show. But then sort of for the let's say for the plain aristocrats, it was still sort of about a meter, sort of close to a meter in width.
Oh,
and then if you
distancing in Georgian times too, obviously.
And then also, if you think of sort of the houses, the front doors in some of the Georgian houses are much wider than the doors that are now sold, because it was purely and simply so that ladies could fit in.
Thank you so much again, Minna.
Thank you everyone, and have a lovely evening.